the Callaway Epic Flash Driver. We're going to spec check it today and see how it does. Let's go. Hi everyone, it's AJ, the Mobile Club Maker. Thank you as always for watching this video. If you enjoy it, please like it, share it, or subscribe to the channel down below. Today we are going to be doing our second driver spec review, and we're going to be looking at the Callaway Epic Flash. So just like last time, I've got 5 different drivers that we're going to measure today. They're all exactly the same. These are all Callaway Epic Flash drivers, 9-degree, stiff flex with the Project X EvenFlow Green shaft. That's one of the stock options. So we're going to measure all 5 of these and see how consistent they are. See what kind of tolerances we're working with. Just like last time, I'm going to show you the process I use to measure these. That being, I'm going to show you how we measure the Loft and the Lie on this machine right here. I'm also going to show you how we did the radial quality of the shafts, just to get an idea of what I did. I've already measured all these clubs ahead of time. It takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to go through them all, take all the measurements, do the adjustments. Obviously, I don't want to put all that on camera because it would be exceedingly boring. So I went ahead, did it all ahead of time. I'll show you a demonstration of what I did again, just so you know, and then we can talk about the results. So first up, let's do a Loft and Lie check on this driver that we have set up in the machine. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be doing today is we're going to be measuring the Loft and the Lie of these drivers. So how do we do that? Well, I've got a second camera here to hopefully give you a little better close-up of what I'm doing when I measure. This, once again, is my Loft and Lie gauge. It's a really thorough piece of equipment that I really like. It gives me lie angles measured on this bar over here, loft angles over here on this gauge. Also has face angle right here on this little gauge. Before I go and measure any of these drivers, every time I start, I calibrate the machine. The machine has 2 different ways to calibrate it. It has an internal calibration system that lets you calibrate it. And then I also have this, which is a little calibration block that I always use. Basically, this is a milled out piece of aluminum, I believe. It has a perfect 10-degree loft angle on it and a 60-degree lie angle on it. I put this in the machine, I measure it, I make sure that what I see on here and on here is what it says on here, and then I know I'm in good shape. So I do that every time just to make sure that the numbers I'm getting on here are always going to be accurate and consistent. So I've already gone ahead and done this, measured it, made sure everything is where it should be. I've already locked this driver head into the shaft clamp here. When I do that, right down here at the bottom, the idea is you want to make sure you have just a little bit of wiggle room underneath the driver. So when you look down here, there is just a little tiny bit of space. And actually, this is probably a little bit more space than I would ideally want. I've got this little, let me bring this down just a touch. Again, I've got this little piece of cardboard with these little furniture pads on it down here that I use basically as just like a little kind of pillow for the club. One, it gives it a little buffer if it needs to move around at all. And secondly, it keeps it a consistent height above the bottom. I can look and make sure it's just touching against that. I can feel if it's just sort of sliding underneath it, I know I get all the clubs in the exact same place. This is important. You know, you have to make sure that this driver is always consistently placed in the machine the same way. Each of these drivers has to be in here at the exact same height off the ground, because if you have any variation here, the loft can change. Well, how does that happen? How does the loft change based on this little amount down here? You have to remember, all drivers have bulge and roll. That's the convex face curvature of it. Bulge going toe to heel and roll going crown to sole. Because of that, if you move around your measurement on the face, you can get all kinds of different numbers. You can put a measurement up here at the top and get a very different measurement from what you would get putting it further down on the bottom, putting it more towards the toe, putting it more towards the heel. So in order to have very consistent data, we have to make sure that we lock the head in the exact same way every single time at the exact same height. The other thing that helps us do that is on this machine, because it has this gauge that lets us actually take our measurement, it has a height adjustment knob over here. So once I get my height adjusted the way I want it, so I know I'm measuring what I believe is the center of the face, it's locked in. As long as I don't touch it, every other driver I put in, assuming I put it in at the same height every time, are all going to measure at the exact same spot on the face. This makes it much simpler than trying to use something like this. This is just a little golf club protractor, which works really well. However, when you're trying to measure something with like drivers that have bulge and roll, well then all of a sudden the angles can really start to play around and shift a little bit if you're not in the exact same place every time. That's why a club gauge like this, where we take all those variables out, we already know that we're measuring the same height on the face every time, and we make sure that we have the club at the same height every time off the base plate, we can get the most consistent numbers that we can ever hope for. So I've got it locked in here. Let's see how our height's looking. This is basically how I've had all these measured, where it's just brushing against these little pads underneath it. That's what we want. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to check the face angle. I want to make sure the face angle, just like last time, I want a face angle of 0. I don't want it any open or closed. Every one of these measurements I take are going to be from a 0 face angle. So we've just made sure by looking on here, this little gauge here, this face is now set completely square, just like you'd be setting up square to the target. Once I do that, now I can do my lie measurement. I make sure the club is locked in, the shaft is nice and tight in there, the club is not going to move around except by the manipulation that I do to it with this gauge. So we're going to go ahead and measure the lie angle. Again, this is a matter of looking at the face, looking at the scoring lines, looking how it sits, figuring out where it's sitting perfectly parallel to the base plate. The thing I like to do is get the scoring lines as close as I can to parallel to the base plate. I figure that's as good a way as any to make sure we get a consistent, accurate lie angle measurement. So we'll go ahead and look at this. I'm going to use my little top of my gauge here to make any sort of adjustments I need to. This is looking like we can just maybe take it down just a little bit. From there, we can then look at our measurement on the lie angle, and we have the lie angle of the club. So after we've done that, next we can measure the loft. I've already gone ahead and I've adjusted the height, so I know that I'm going to be measuring from the center of the club head for every club I measure. Once I do that, then it's just another measurement of making sure my face angle is right at 0, which it is. Then I bring up my loft gauge and I can measure the number right here. Okay, so as you can see here, we've gone and taken the head off the shaft. We don't need the head for this. We're going to move that to the side. We don't want it to get damaged. It's kind of bulky, gets in the way. We've replaced it with this 200-gram weight. This will approximate the weight of the driver head and give us consistent data, because we will use this same weight on every shaft and every measurement we take, thereby keeping all the variables minimal. Like I said, the adapter's on here. The weight is just screwed onto the end here. I've also got a piece of masking tape. This is just to keep these little rings that these Callaway adapters have, these little cogs that you use to adjust the lie and the loft, keeps them from rattling around when we're doing our frequency measurements. From there, once again, this is our frequency machine. This is the clamp over here. The shaft goes in here. We tighten it down. This is preset to a certain tension, so when it hits that, it clicks, lets us know that the shaft is in there every single time at the same tension. This is the actual frequency analyzer. The shaft moves between these two sensors. The more times it moves between them in a given period of time, the stiffer the shaft is. We take 6 different measurements for each of these shafts to figure out what kind of radial consistency we've got. Show you quickly how we do that. We'll take the shaft, Loosen the gauge up, slide it in here. Once I have that in there like that, tighten it down. Whoop. Clicks, tells me it's locked in. That's not going to get any tighter than that. From here, I like to just use a pencil. Take it, press down on the weight here on the end. I'm going to let it go, and then I'm going to hit the button, and we'll get a frequency number. 243, in case you couldn't see that. We'll do it a few times. Down, get a number, take another one, 244. From there, we'll then record that, come in here, loosen it up a little, rotate it 30 degrees. I'm just approximating this because this is just a demonstration, just to give you an idea what we're doing. We'll tighten it down again, clicks, same thing. Push it down, release it, hit the button, 240. Okay, so now that I've shown you how we've taken all the measurements, let's go ahead and look at what those measurements were. The lie angles on all these drivers, all 5 of these drivers, were very consistent. They were all basically within 1 degree, right between 60 and 61 degrees. So very consistent on the lie angles. Next, the lofts. The lofts were again what I would consider to be very consistent. If you look across all 5 drivers, the lowest loft was 8.8. The highest we got, and this was with 2 of the drivers, was 9.4. So we had 8.8, 8.9, 9.0, 9.4, and 9.4. All of them within 0.6 degrees. The weight on all these drivers, again, we were very, very close across all 5. The lowest weight was about 192 grams, and the heaviest was 194 grams. And the others were 193. So all of them within 2 grams, you know, 1 swing weight point essentially between all 5 of these drivers. Finally, we looked at the shafts. We looked at the radial consistency, you know, how they flex in different planes to see how consistent, how consistent each of the shafts are individually, and secondly, how consistent are the shafts one to the next. I have to say, individually, these shafts were pretty darn impressive, especially for what is a, you know, off-the-rack stock shaft offering. This isn't an upgrade charge shaft. This is just the shaft that you get in the driver when you buy it off the rack. The numbers, basically, all of them fell within, well, let's count them up here. Driver 1 fell between hard side to soft side, 251 hard side, 244 soft side, so 7 cycles difference. Driver 2, 246 hard side, 241 soft side, 5 cycles different. Driver 3, 246 hard side, 240 soft side, again, 6 cycles. Driver 4, 244 hard side, 241 soft side, 3 cycles different. And driver 5, 242 hard side, 238 soft side, 4 cycles different. When we're looking at these numbers as far as the hard side to soft side, you know, if you're within 2%, you're doing pretty well. And if you're within 1%, you're doing extremely well. That being the difference between the hard side and the soft side measurements. As you can see from these, we were all in that, basically in that range, which, considering, again, this is a stock shaft offering. This Project X EvenFlow Green shaft is the stock offering. It's not an upgrade. It showed itself to be very consistent hard side to soft side. That being said, it did have a little bit more of a range when we look across all 5 shafts. Even though we had, what was it? The maximum we had was 6 cycles in one individual shaft. When we look across the group, we get ranges all the way at the high end, 251. At the low end, we get 238. That's 13 cycles. Again, that's not within one shaft, that's across the whole bunch, but it does tell you that there is a little bit of variety as far as if you pick up one shaft, if you pick up one driver off the rack and another driver off the rack with the same shaft, you know, there is a little bit more inconsistency there, possibly, as far as how stiff that shaft is going to play. I have to say, overall, once again, I thought this club was very consistent. I've had this preconceived notion in my head that when I started doing this, I was going to get measurements that were, when I'm looking at Loft or Lie, that were going to be, you know, 1 degree high or low. So this, again, this 9 degree could be 8, it could be 10, and then you've got 2 different drivers where they're 2 degrees apart. But that is really, at least thus far with the drivers that I've measured, has not been the case. They've all been very consistent. They've all been in a very tight range overall. So I have to say that's all very impressive. The weights, again, very consistent overall, just a couple grams difference from the heaviest to the lightest. And the shafts, the Project X EvenFlow Green for a stock offering, very consistent radial quality, looking at them individually. Looking at them at the group, a little bit more variety as far as the amount of flex that you're going to see one to the next. Not a huge difference. Again, I got 13 cycles across all 5 drivers, that being the stiffest of the stiff side versus the softest of the soft side across all 5. Really not a huge difference. 13, that is going to, though, be what I would consider, you know, a flex, regular to stiff, stiff to extra stiff. So it is at least something to think about. So there you go. This is our second spec review of drivers. I'm going to be putting together more of these driver spec reviews. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, again, please go down below and like it, share it, or subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you again soon. Until then, keep it in the short grass.